Howdy y'all, and welcome back to a video of I just want to do stuff and I thought it would help people. Passing on knowledge. So, too long, didn't read of this video is I'm going to be going over, what bike frames are used for what different purposes, how you would want to choose, how you would want to choose what bike you were going with, and, some things you can do to fit it to yourself. Specifically, as Michael asked, is how to fit your saddle or your seat to fit you. So, a few things we need to consider is that my garage is filthy. I don't apologize for that. It's just filthy. So that. So when you want to choose a bicycle, a few things you want to consider is what is your riding experience? How long has it been since you've ridden a bike? And or what are you specifically looking for, or what purpose are you looking to use this bike for? You can use it for recreation, for exercise, or for practical purposes, such as you want to use a bicycle as a alternate or primary form of transportation. So a few things to consider about that is what is your frame, or what is the intent that you have behind what you want to use your bike for. Primary forms of transportation, you need to make sure that you're accounting for things such as being able to lock up the bike, what the bike looks like in regards to whether or not someone would want to steal it, and what it's made out of. So, one thing we're going to be going over as well is what type of frame equates to what kind of comfort level and what you would want to intend to use it for. So, 3 different bike frames that I'm going to be going over are 3 different styles of frames and materials. And they, in fact, equate to few different things when it comes to feel of the bike, what its intended use is for, and just what you would be using it for. So, this right here is a fix-up frame that I'm doing for a friend. This was the first bike that she ever purchased here in the United States with her own money, and she wanted to buy something that was going to help just be something that was durable, and it's a very old bike. So this is high tensile steel frame, which means it is a very durable frame that is nearly bomb-proof, but it is relatively heavy. If you're going anywhere above 20 pounds on a bike frame, no matter what its purpose is, that is relatively heavy, so you will have to account for that. This in particular is known as a step-through frame, because you notice how this top bar right here, which is the top tube, is slanted down. You have a lot of clearance space to lift your leg over either side of the frame. So, case in point for this is that a lot of people will say that this is a female bike frame. So that has its history based in bicycle design, when for the most part women really didn't ride bicycles, or it was not socially acceptable for femme presenting folks to ride bikes. This is not a gendered bike. It's made out of metal. It's a vehicle. That doesn't matter to me. This is a bike which is designed for ease of use, and so that way you can get on and off the bike, and is very receptive to wearing different types of clothing. So that's something to consider. This is a heavy steel bike with a step-through frame, and as you see this, it has flat riser bars. So this bike is specifically designed so you're going to be spending a lot of time in an upward or upright position, not a lot of lower back strain. You're going to be pedaling at a nice leisurely pace, and this bike can be meant for many different purposes because of its configuration. It has 26-inch tires, which are fat, which are thick, which means that they can have a lot of surface area. They have low PSI, so when you go over a regular paved road, you're not going to get a lot of road buzz or sensation. You're going to be able to deal with a lot of different obstacles that road bikes in particular might not be able to do that. And this has 3 cogs in the front and it has 6 cogs in the back, which means this is a 21 or 18 speed. You have a wide range of gears, so in case you want to climb mountains or climb hills or go quickly on straightaways, this is a versatile bike, but it is meant for different things. Upright position. It has places on the back of the frame where those holes are there and there that are meant for adding a carriage or panniers on the back, so you can use this as a grocery runner. This is a good option for a bicycle that covers a lot of bases. It's not particularly good at one or many things, but it's a good roundabout bicycle. You can use this as basically anything you want. Main form of transportation. Using this as a grocery runner in case you want to just use this to pick up groceries and other errands and stuff like that. You can also use this to just exercise or have fun, but it's not particularly good at anything, any one thing. It's just middle ground on lots of different things. So that to consider. Next up, we have a different frame. This is a single speed frame, which for my purposes, I like to ride it. I like to ride single speed bikes because I prefer the challenge and I like the physicality of always being in the wrong gear. That is, I ride this bike for fun and as an alternate and or main form of transportation. So I add both of those at the same time. So if you look at this frame, notice that the top tube is at a slant. This is not a step-through frame. This is what is known as a slack geometry aluminum frame. This is an aluminum, this is a high-end felt aluminum frame, which is extremely light, sub 16 pounds. And the sensation of feeling inside of the frame with this slack section right here is what is actually meant to be used in a bicycle like this. So the slack geometry on this means that you as a rider sit farther back into the frame or down into the frame. And because I have drop bars on the front, I use this as a sort of speed bicycle. It's configured for a certain type of geometry. Instead of me being in a upright position where my handlebars are higher up, I sit on this and I lean forward. Hence why the seat is so thin at this section right here. If I lean back, all of my weight is resting on the back of the saddle right here on your sit bones. Whereas if you lean forward, less and less material is used here on the front of the saddle to accommodate for your weight. For the most part, that comes into play of like, what is your riding style and what you intend this to be used for. The drop bars are for speed and versatility. I use them for many different purposes, but mainly this type of bike would be higher, more aggressive geometry to accommodate for more speed. You're going to be sweating more. You're going to be working out more on this bike because you're always going to be technically in the wrong gear. You can go uphill and it's going to put a lot of pressure. You're going to need to pedal harder to maintain mechanical advantage. If you're going downhill, you're not going to be able to get up into a higher gear so that way you can go faster. You're always going to be in the wrong gear. But for me, I like that because it's simplicity. It's a very, very simple machine. You don't have a lot of maintenance for this. You're not going to have to worry about your chain falling off or any other particular maintenance other than regular bike maintenance. So I like that because I ride this bike main form of transportation and for fun, for recreation and exercise. It's a combination of lots of things. Next up, this bike. This bike is a bike I got from a sale this is a State bicycle frame. This is not high tensile. This is chromoly steel. So it is as strong as high tensile steel, but it is significantly lighter. This is sub 16 pounds as well. So when you ride this bike, this is what is referred to as a track bike, if I can get a good shot of it. So we're looking at this frame, and the top tube right here is still a little bit slack, but it is nearly parallel to the ground. And notice how when you're looking at this perspective, the seat, the saddle right here looks like it's slightly above the handlebars, and that's exactly what that is meant for. A track bike geometry is meant to be as aggressive as possible to achieve high speed, and that is it. That's why this frame is very light. It is robust. You will be spending a lot of time bent forward, which may or may not put a lot of pressure on your lower back, depending on how you ride the bike. In particular, I tend to switch between having my hands here on the top and not on the bottom. I use the bottom drops right here for leverage when I'm going uphill or I want to do a fast start. Otherwise, I like to maintain grips here on the top because I'm in a more upright position so I can maintain a good cadence. So, main form of transportation, light. It's a single speed, so it's less complexity, so it looks relatively like something a thief would not want to steal because they're looking for components. A lot of the time, bike thieves don't know what they're looking at unless it's extremely expensive looking, like very expensive race bikes. This does not look like that. So, materials, it is light. Single speed, it is wrong gear all the time, but it is a fun bike. It is a simple bike. You can use this as a commuter. You can use this for any purpose that you want. Just remember that you are the engine on this. You are the engine on all of these bicycles, but this is the least complex because it has a single speed, just as the other one. And this is intended as a commuter, main form of transportation. Aggressive geometry. So this will be good for exercise. This will be good for commuting, doing specific, or for commuting, for main form of transportation, and for exercise as well, because this is a single speed. Now that comes up to the next section, because that is basically a good rundown of why or how you would want to choose a specific bicycle. Something else to add to that, since we're now remembering. So on the mountain bike, those big, fat, thick tires are run at low PSI, so that way you can get away with going over bumps. On the single speed here, and on the single speed here, these run 700C wheels, which means that they run very thin and under high PSI. So these are intended to be used on these are only intended to be used on paved roads, or if you make them a little bit fatter with some more grip, maybe a tiny bit of gravel. But for the most part, these are thin. These are high PSI. They're nearly as hard as rubber, hard, solid rubber. So you are going to feel a lot of road issues, a lot of potholes, and you're going to want to be very cognizant of where you ride this bike. So something to consider about that. Speed. Not so much versatility, not so much speed, but versatility, because you can go on multiple spaces and multiple surfaces with the mountain bike with larger tires. So, comes up to the next section. As Michael asked, I'm going to go over how to figure out how to adjust your seat. Not everything else is kind of subjective based upon you as a person to fit, but when it comes to fitting the saddle and how high or low it needs to be for you, that's actually pretty universal and simple. So we're going to go over that in a pretty simple way since I have a grip here. So as we're looking at the bike here, this saddle right here and the bars are nearly parallel. A general word or reference you want to have for your saddle is you want it to be flat compared to the ground. So as this is on the ground, you can adjust your saddle to be flat. As you look at some other frames and bicycles, you see how the front of that saddle is just slightly upright. That's because, so if you didn't already know this, the cant or angle of your saddle, if it's forward, you're going to be falling off of it, or more like you're going to be forcing yourself onto your pedals more often to stay out of the saddle. If you're moving your saddle backwards, as in a backwards tilt, you're going to be falling backwards off of this saddle and constantly feeling like you need to grip, you need to compensate. You need to grip onto the handlebars more and try to lean forward more. Either of those is ideal for whichever situation you might specifically need, but when it comes to general riding practice and feel, you take the saddle and you make it flat, parallel to the ground. If you feel like you need a little bit of adjustment, then that is totally on you, but that's a good place to start. Completely flat to the ground. Next, hopefully I can get a good shot of this. So let's see. If I can set this camera down. Okay. Saddle right here. Pedals all the way down on the ground. No, this is not going to work. Let's see what's a good way of doing this. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so looking at your leg going all the way down. If you are viewing, oh God, this is going to be hella awkward. Okay, so let's try this out. Tilt you back a tiny bit. Apologies for the technical issues at this point. Here we go. That's actually working out quite well. Let's try that. I'll move you back. Okay. So when you're on your bicycle and you see people on the street who have their knees super hyper bent when they're lifting up into the pedal, that is not best positioning. What you want when you're on the seat or when you're on the saddle, you want saddle parallel to the ground. When you are up in position, you want to take the pedal that is on your left side or right side, and you want to push it all the way down into position, just like that. When your foot is on that pedal, your leg should not be overextended. It should not be all the way locked out. You should not be straining to try to position your pedal, or to try to position your foot on your pedal. What you want is the balls of your feet and your toes to be flat on the pedal, and you want a slight bend in your knee. This is good positioning for my height, and it doesn't matter if it's super high or super low, as long as you get to a position where your leg at the bottom of the pedal stroke is slightly bent. That is the position that you want. And you can do that in a number of different ways, but for the most part, you figure that out by changing the height of your saddle. And different bicycles have different means of doing that, but for the most part, I'm going to show you a few simple aspects of how that works. Because these are pretty standard. Even most manufacturers will use this type of mechanism. So, this is a seat tube. This is the section that goes down into your frame, and in a particular position, you clamp it off, or you cinch the section off where it is that you have your seat clamp. I'll show you. On the State bike, you have the seat post and the clamp right here. Now what I did on this particular bike is, since I've adjusted this seat a few times, take a permanent marker, mark where it is that you figured out what your particular height is, so that way your leg is not hyperextended at a slight bend, and just make a ring around it. That way you know precisely where you need to go. Then, from there, you come here to the top, to this mechanism, which is identical to this mechanism. Over here, as we are, this sits down on the bike, and this section right here, cross section, is basically a clamping rail system. Here on the back, you have a hex nut, which is more than likely a 5 or a 6, but what this does, there may be multiple iterations of this, but you just loosen this, and it pulls the nut all the way down, so that way this section right here, where these indentations are, hold the rails inside of your saddle. As it sits right here on your bike, the rails on the side, and underneath. This is the main point of contact between yourself and the bike, where all the force is generated into the frame. So what you do, you loosen whatever mechanism that is holding your frame in place, or your saddle, and you adjust or place your saddle into position. As you see, the indentations hold in place right here. So then from there, as this is a drawn out process, what you do is you turn this clamping mechanism back into position, and from there you tighten the nut and it holds it down into place. And from there, then you need to figure out a few things, such as this is how the seat post sits into the frame, which, as you look at this angle, means that the saddle would be facing downwards. From there, you just loosen your nut, your hex nut right here, probably a 5 or 6 millimeter, and then you move this back or forward. There's always a little bit of play in every mechanism, or in every clamping mechanism, to account for angle of incidence on your saddle. And from there, you get to the point where you either want, if you feel like you're sitting upright in the bike and you always want to stay upright, go ahead and maintain your saddle being parallel, or maybe just slightly canted backwards, depending on where you like resting your weight. If you like staying on the pedals and pedaling a lot very quickly, you can cant this a little bit forward, just so that way you're more resting here on the front of the saddle. But for the most part, all of your clamping mechanisms for bike seats, for saddles, are going to be relatively the same. Some of them might have additional points of contact for more adjustability, but they all work on the same principle of a railing system, or on higher end bikes, other forms of contact, where you just make it parallel, just like that. And so, to recap, we went through different materials of bicycles, what they mean and what they can mean for your ride, riding positions, what they can mean for what style of cycling that you want and what purpose it is that you want to choose or use a bicycle, tires, and what they can mean for versatility versus speed, or affecting the ride and what you would want to use that ride for, and positioning of seats or your saddles and geometry of frames that affect the ride and what you intend to use the bicycle for. Mountain bikes, for the most part, are not going to be super fast, but they are versatile. They work on all kinds of, even cheap mountain bikes work on all different surfaces. They are very forgiving when it comes to making mistakes, especially here in New Mexico where we have goat heads. Single speed bikes, single speed, freewheel or fixed, you will find out quickly whether or not you like that style or not once you get onto that style of bike. It's up to you. But road bikes, not as versatile as mountain bikes, but they are designed for speed and they are designed for simplicity in certain configurations. Geared bikes give you options for gearing if you don't feel confident in certain leg strength or cardiovascular strength. Single speed bikes are a good way of helping you figure out what pacing and what you can do on a bicycle, because you're not going to be able to go any further on a single speed unless you get stronger personally. Single speeds, exercise. Road bikes, good for metro, good for metro and racing. So if y'all have any questions, concerns, or anything, please, by all means, post, DM me, anything you like, and I will do a follow-up if you like. Thank you.